So how do we address this without being the bad guys? And I'm going to say something controversial. As I look at us, and I don't look at us this way. I look at us as three people who know about the world of sports and soccer in particular, but we're three Latinos, two Latinos and a Latina. Does that allow us to be a little more critical of versus three Anglo men in their 60s talking about women's soccer? Does that make sense? If three Anglo men were to say
It's three different voices. I think we can look at it that way, where it's not, Alex and his buddies, right, talking about the dash and how.
You are my buddies, but anyway.
No, or even if it was Laura and her buddies, right? If it was like an all women's group, speaking on the dash, you don't have the, maybe a perspective from, an older male who could be a father of soccer players, a coach in your case. So I do think, I hate to use the word because it's overused. It is diversity as far as getting different takes, but you do need some of that because you do need to sort of get everybody's side a little bit, and then not make the best decision from those outcomes. But going back to what you were originally saying, I mean, I think what's a fair way to do this is to do it with the truth, to do it journalistically, to analyze it the way it is. They haven't done a good job with soccer decisions. They haven't put the sport of soccer first. A lot of these hires, and I'll use this term because what they use in the corporate world are DEI hires. Jessica O'Neill is there being the president because she's a woman and she was chosen by Ted Siegel to run this organization. They got a female general manager who was inexperienced at her position as well. It wasn't like they went out and got the best female general manager. They went and got somebody who, and I can tell you this from sources, poorly recommended. But those are decisions that were made. You can go on to the head of marketing, female, the recent public relations manager, up until shortly before, now she's no longer there, also female. But this is all, in the end, just side chatter as well, right? Because it all starts at the top with the owner, Ted Siegel, and it's not about soccer. It's about being an investment. It's about it's about social causes. It's about the Dynamo charities, Dynamo and Dash charities. That's a big part of it, and I'm not against it. That's a great cause as well. Sure. I think for a lot of years, the Dynamo Dash charities aspect of this club was getting ignored. But it can't all be about the charities if you don't have the soccer aspect to it, and if you don't have the winning to it, and if you don't have the proper people in charge. That was the case with the Dynamo for so long. They went out and got Pat Onstad. I don't agree with necessarily all the soccer decisions that he's made, but it's a soccer guy making soccer decisions, and I don't think they have that dash.
Well, let me go back to the.
That was a bit short. That was a bit long-winded.
No, that was beautiful though. But let me go back to the point on the dash before we go to the Dynamo, because on the Dynamo side, 3 years in, and we talked about this briefly today, Victor. 3 years in, Pat Onstad is sticking to his plan. Again, the team should make the playoffs. Again, the team should be more competitive. We'll deal with why the stadiums for both teams, or the stadium for both teams, isn't selling. But at the end of the day, and I'll go back to Laura. Laura, at the end of the day, it's the Dash have been a franchise, an unsuccessful franchise, period, on and off the field. We cannot sell out the stadium. One game close, one playoff game, that was kind of the best environment I've ever lived. Other than that, there's nothing to show in the myriad of coaches that have been there, the myriad now of general managers from the
But why did they get to the playoffs? Why did they get to that game?
Well, I think because of the coach, number one, who's no longer here. Where are you going with that, though?
There's your answer. There's your answer.
Yeah.
They finally had the soccer aspect. They were finally working on it. And they decided, we're going to go in a completely different direction. And this is why they're at 2 years later.
So let me ask you this. I interrupt you. They then someone needs to be responsible for. Alex Singer is the one that also was there in the tail end of Amoros's reign. if that's the right term, when he was there. So she negotiated that deal, if I'm not mistaken. That was one of her first negotiations, wasn't it? Laura, can you help me with this? Is that right? Or did Alex Singer come after?
She came before the end of the season, but she came, but Morris was here before the GM. That was a Jessica O'Neill hire, which is why I was a bit surprised that they let him walk.
Well, you mentioned the name, so it falls on Jessica O'Neill. At the end of the day, that's where the responsibility lies. So do you think then Mr. Ted Siegel is going to look at Jessica and say, listen, Jess, this isn't working? She's not really running the Dynamo side.
I would go further and say that Jessica O'Neill is just an extension of the owner. She's doing what the owner is asking her to do. Mm-hmm. So to an extent, maybe she gets a bit of
a pass, because
not a pass. Maybe she gets a little leeway with some of the decision making. But at the end of the day, the owner's got to sign off. If the owner sees he's got a guy who can assess talent, who just took the team to the playoffs for the first time ever.
Yeah.
What was that in about 8 seasons? And he let the coach walk. He's not going to ask questions and say, hey, why are we letting him go? Explain that to me.
You would think so. Laura, are we asking the right questions here to figure this out? The reality, Laura, is that no one's talking. We just don't know what's happening behind the scenes. And as you know, all three of us are involved in the official broadcast for this team. And we talk to the PR people, and there's nothing on Fran Alonso. There's nothing on Alex Singer. There's nothing on, I didn't even know about some of the injuries.
I just think, like we were talking earlier, I think that there's been a lot. I understand PR, I understand marketing, because I've done it a lot. Outside of like the soccer world, I've done a lot of nonprofits. But my general, I guess, rule is to get in front of the problem and not behind it or hide it. Because journalists are going to do what journalists are going to do, and it's going to make you look worse. So whenever there was like an emergency or something like that, I would rather go ahead and be upfront. Obviously, with the green light of the owners and the presidents and all that. So I think that this is it's an icky situation, right? Because the PRs who we talk to are doing their jobs, and then they're not allowed to talk. They're not allowed to talk because they're, at the end of the day, they're not the ones that manage everything. So I think that there is a lack of transparency, but this is something that isn't new. Has been something that the Dynamo has suffered as well. So it's not like, the Dash is the only one that's being punished by like a fog of misinformation or chatter or no information. This is something that has been kind of like the culture for a while now from the Dynamo as well.
But
I think it's interesting to see.
I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm very rude, and I apologize to you.
Yeah.
But the culture, thank you. But the culture is not a carryover from the previous ownership, is it? My logic would be here that Ted Siegel came in with his vision of what this should be, and
the logo's different, the owner's different,
but that lack of transparency,
different GM. No, exactly. That's what I was getting to. All these other pieces, they're all different faces, but in the end, it's all the same thing. It's the same thing that's been going on. It's the same culture that's carried over. New ownership didn't matter. Same culture is carried on. Same policy of not being transparent. Same policy of just, we'll just let this die down. We'll be silent. We're not going to answer questions. Nobody's going to care, and we'll just move on.
Yeah, it's like, again, when Carly Lloyd, they made a big fuss when Carly Lloyd, and there was another one, I can't remember her name, but she was also big at that moment. Also with the women's national team, but Carly Lloyd was, yes, there you go. So they were like the top, Carly Lloyd was like the it woman at that moment. So there was like there was flyers, like interviews. We did all this big thing, like blah, blah, blah. And she left like, I think she played like 6 games, I think. And then boom, she's gone. And then boom, the other person was gone. And then they're like all gone by the end of the season. And nobody really said anything like, what's going on? They kind of just used, it was a transfer, the transfer window and blah, blah, blah. But they never officially said, if they knew that was going to happen, then why make it such a big deal? Because that means they didn't know. They weren't expecting for them to leave the way they left. So that's kind of
something that upsets fans too. This isn't its destination as much as they say it is.
Exactly. So
Players
that
don't want to
really,
be here. Top players don't want to be here.
yeah, and that's what it's also upsetting to fans. Fans aren't stupid. Fans know. So if they have a big name, even Maria Sanchez, Maria Sanchez, they sold, they
A
sold
lot
her
of
like
fans
she
were
was.
saying that she didn't want to be here. It's all on her. Now are they saying the same thing? Do they kind of sympathize a little bit?
But do we know? Do we know that for a fact? Because of the Dash, not all teams are like this, but if the Dash simply said, "Oh, we have parted ways," Maria Sanchez is going, she wants to make more money, or she feels like this is not the mental health environment that she needs for her growth. Even that would cut off a lot of things that people are guessing, because that also affects fans, because fans are like, well, whose fault is it? Is it the player or is it the organization itself? So there's always like what ifs.
Well, I want to do a reset here, and thanks for you friends joining us on Soccer Tejas. I'm Alex Parra, with me Laura Gomez and Victor Araiza. We're talking a little bit of soccer. We're talking a little bit of NWSL, in particular the Houston Dash. And I think that's one of the topics that has to be discussed. The team right now is headed not to the playoffs. They're headed, I think, to a complete reset. I'm going to use the term politely for now. The season's not what was intended to be, but I think it started. You mentioned Maria Sanchez, Laura. This team, when games started back in the spring, it was Maria Sanchez's name and face. She was the name and face of this franchise. We were at a press conference where we asked Jane Campbell, Jane, do you still see yourself as the face of this club? And she said, no, that's Maria. How can that
She's the one with the contract.
How can you turn so quickly from that's what everyone, including Maria Sanchez, accepts and talks about, and within weeks it disintegrated? Clearly, something went wrong. So either one of you, give me your take on the Maria Sanchez, basically, fiasco. I'll put it that way.
She didn't want to be here in the first place. And I think the reasons why she didn't want to be here, and you're seeing them now, it's because it's an unambitious club. It's not a club ascending. It's not a club heading towards winning, towards getting to the playoffs. Again, when they had a coach that finally got them going, the team punted and went the other way. Last year, they went with a different coach in Sam Lady. That, again, whether it was him, whether it was the GM's decision, they basically tore that team apart. They had Ebony Salmon, who was a goal scorer. They put her on the bench. I would be disgruntled too, because if I was in her position, I'd be livid at how she had a chance to be at the Women's World Cup, and they sat her on the bench after she had a top goal scorer season to just redo everything and bring in Diana Ordonez, who's a fine player, but you're switching around the whole script. Only to then fire Sam Lady later on in the season after that first year. Now you start differently with a different head coach in front of Alonso, and I'm sure again we didn't get to see him have a real chance. Maybe he had some good ideas. Maybe he would have been a great coach. But Maria Sanchez, at her age, in her career, she couldn't have stuck around to find out. I mean, if she has a chance to go to a winning team, a stadium that has fans, I think anybody would take that in a heartbeat. Also, again, because I know we get those takes, just like Lara was saying, what Court fans say, oh, well, she didn't want to be here, then why did she take the contract, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What we've learned from asking around is that I believe the Dash had the right to, because of the way the NWSL rules are, it was basically if the Dash wanted to keep her, she was going to have to stay here because of the NWSL rules, because she was an unrestricted free agent. So as much as maybe, we heard little rumors there that, she might have wanted to move to San Diego anyways, and San Diego wanted her, she couldn't go because if the Dash matched the offer, she had to stay here. And, to that effect, maybe the Dash said, we're going to offer her the biggest contract in women's soccer history, which is, they made a big fuss about that, right? Today Show on NBC and all these other programs, because they love the PR. They love that kind of PR. Oh, we're innovators, front runners, biggest contract, and so here's your player, and maybe you're right. Maybe she took the money. Maybe she should have said, "I go to Europe. I'll go back to Mexico." At the end of the day, she ended up working, and I give her agent credit for this. She ended up making the move anyways. And I didn't hear people saying, good for Maria, good for fighting for her career. Good for Maria for trying to get the most, trying to be competitive. No, all I heard was, wow, Alex Singer put off this great deal, a player that didn't want to be here, and she got an amazing exchange back. But I think going back to the point that we were starting at, there was signs there at the beginning of the season. I think in the off season and even going back to the previous years. And maybe it just started disintegrating this year.
Laura, there was no perfect scenario for Maria Sanchez. Mexican American experience on the field, a leader on the field, young enough but not veteran enough. It seemed like all the ingredients were there. Everyone, including, I'll call myself an outsider, excited about Maria Sanchez and Diana Ordóñez and still having Jane Campbell and all of it coming together. What do you think fell apart? And we're starting to see some common denominators that these players are not sticking around. I'm not going to tell you that I pretend to know what the reason is, but Maria Sanchez was a perfect fit. It didn't work out.
Yeah, I'm going to have to disagree with Victor. I do think that she did want to be here in the beginning. I think that she knew in her mind that this was going to be like a trampoline for her career in the NWSL. I don't think that she was going to be a player how they were kind of like picturing her of being a staple in the Dash. Now that I never thought she was going to be, because I was like, well, if this team doesn't turn around within 1 year, she's going to want to leave. And I think that's what happened. I think that she did come in to the Dash with an open mind and honestly with an open heart too, because she really did click with a lot of the fans here. She felt very at home. You know, she was from Tigres, and there's a big fan here from the Tigres community. So I think that she felt comfortable enough to come in and start to do what she wanted to do. But again, she's in that age that she wants to perfect her game and make money while you can, right? So
but she was making money here. She was making the same money she was making in San Diego.
Yeah, making money here. But that's what I'm saying. She wanted to use the Dash as a trampoline. Again, like I said, I don't think she was going to stay here for.
But you know whose fault that is? That's the Dash fault for getting suckered into that deal.
I understand that. But the point is, I think that the Dash also took it as if she stays here, good. And if she doesn't, we still made a PR kind of scene that we brought her here.
I think they were trying to avoid the bad PR of her leaving and people asking, why did the franchise player just leave? When they could have just said, she wanted big money. It didn't make sense for us. Yeah, and you know what? It's easier to part ways.
People that have been following the team long enough know that this is not the first time a big name leaves abruptly. So I think people really now, I think that it has transitioned from kind of saying, oh, Carly Laurie got a lot of hate from people here from Houston. I mean, I remember reading Twitters that I was like, whoa. I mean, like, this is a lot. Even as a reporter, I was like, yeah, that kind of sucks that she left just like that, but we don't know really what would happen. And the same thing with Maria Sanchez. It's been very divided. Some people are like, oh, she's a traitor. Like, she was over here throwing the H signs up and then she left. But at the same time, they're seeing that this team is not evolving, because every year when we go into that season, it's like, oh, we're remaking ourselves. How many freaking times can you remake yourself? I'm already annoyed by that word. It's like, we're remaking ourselves. We're revamping. Like, how many times you need to revamp? Like, I've had enough. Like, I understand you have to, change and evolve, but this team has just, and I feel so bad for the players like Sophie Schmidt, who has been there forever, for Campbell, who has been there forever. Like, it just blows my mind, because it's a lot of like mental health things too.
So all this said, and here's two specific examples of players: Maria Sanchez for the Dash, Hector Herrera for the Dynamo. And since they have been here, and someone can correct me, and you guys will, the stadium has sold out once since both of those players were in Houston. So even though we say it's a perfect fit, that's what I said, even though that
maybe twice with Herrera, maybe if they, based on their numbers, maybe even a third time.
Okay,
that first season.
Let's give them 3, and they were under the Dynamo, a Dynamo match at Shell Energy. So let's give them 3. Laura, as even a PR stunt, Maria Sanchez was not out in the community. Hector Herrera is not out in the community. That's what puzzles me. Yes, it's logical to bring in Mexican Americans or players that have ties to Mexican football in some way. But when they are here, the result isn't a full stadium. Maria Sanchez didn't sell out a stadium.
Well, look, I think that
So yeah, forgive me real quick. So is it another miscalculation, or is Houston just a strange market? Where does responsibility lie? I'm not going to use the word fault. Where does responsibility lie? Because now there's a repeated pattern here of, you know what? We try this, but it's not working. We even gave Maria Sanchez the biggest, at the time, the biggest salary in league history. And we had another 4,000 people show up at the stadium.
But I think that we have to treat them separately. I'm going to go with the Dynamo with Héctor Herrera. Yes, he's a big name, but is he a huge name? Is he like Chicharito or even Vela? I mean, obviously, you say Mexican American, but I'm sure he would sell out if they bring Lionel Messi here. I mean, if Cristiano Ronaldo decides to live in humid Houston, I'm sure they're gonna sell out. So I think we also have to know what category of big names we're kind of throwing out there. I'm Colombian,
So they mistake Herrera as one of those type of players?
I don't know. I don't think they mistook. I think it's what was in their budget, honestly, or what they were trying to conform. Because I think Herrera, he has a lot of trajectory. He has a lot of fame, and people know him. But is he a player? And you're Mexican, Victor, right? You guys are Mexican. I'm Colombian. But as far as like the people that I've worked with, or like the Mexicans I've spoken to, they're like, yeah, he's all right. Victor Herrera, yeah, he's fine. But was he like? I don't even if you say like, I don't know what other like.
I'm a Texan.
Old school
I'm a
names,
Texan.
like
He's not a magnet. He's not a magnet like
exactly.
like a Chicharito or a Vela. But
exactly.
that said, for an organization that for years didn't have anybody to work with marketing wise, you finally have a player that you can do something with, and they don't even market that. So I think it lies on both sides.
So I think they wanted to ride on kind of like, oh, it's Victor Herrera. You guys are happy now, or whoa, what's up? Like, are you guys gonna be content enough and come out here? And it hasn't been like that. So I think that it has
people to show up just because they exist.
Exactly. Just because they say, oh, look, Herrera, but they also have to know that yes, he's a big name, but he's not one of the biggest names. So you have to do some work to get people out there. Now for the dash part,
right?
Sanchez, I think that women's soccer here hasn't been grown enough the way that it should be, and a lot of people didn't even know who she was, even if she was a big name, with the Mexican nationals, or you would like with Tigres, because Tigres, the women sell out over there, so they probably knew her, but people here were like, oh, who is she? Like, is she new? Is she is she like the who is she? So a lot of people were like, who is she? And that's when they started to get to know about her.
Maybe, but I see her in San Diego, and I see her doing endorsement deals. I see her getting marketed around town, and I see her having.
So there was.
And I see her having a Mexican supporters group now. Maybe it helps if you're across the border from Mexico, but I don't think we're too far off here with the population either.
I think it could have been done here. I think it could have been done, but the marketing wasn't hitting it. It just wasn't. I mean, look at the Texans. The Texans has been a team that has been doing horribly for so many seasons, but they still sell out, if I'm not mistaken, or close to being sold out. But they're everywhere. Like they
also got improved players.
Exactly. Yeah. But the thing is, again, I think that it does have to do a lot with marketing, knowing that there's things that you have to do to incorporate those players that maybe
it does. CJ Stroud gives you good sound bites. CJ Stroud gives you quotes that connect with the fan base. When you see the Dynamo or the Dash, these players they give you very little to connect with. It's very cassette answers. It's almost like they don't realize what they can gain by some of these press conferences. And some of these coaches, they come out here, and I mean, it's like they look bored to be there. And when that Zoom video gets played across town, you know how that body language comes across. I mean, all these little things that they're not paying attention to.
So Victor,
it all builds up.
Victor and Laura, let me take you in one final direction on I believe topical to the conversation. Often when conversations like ours take place, and I think they take place among many fans, the media, and I accuse myself, and I'm guilty of this at times because of our sport. I love this sport. I want it to thrive, and I want it to grow, and I want it to succeed. Mm-hmm. We hold back a little bit. All three of us have lived this. If we were overly critical of the sport in our city, it's to the detriment of what we're trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
But is the time now right to start asking serious questions from an objective point of view and say, look, success isn't coming now with the new owner? Is the grace period over? Is it time to be a little bit more direct and saying, look, if these things don't work, is it because you don't know, you don't care, the community doesn't care? Laura, you mentioned that maybe there's rumblings here and there about Maria Sanchez, but it stopped there. It stopped with maybe 4,000 people at the stadium because there is no consequence. Other professional
Mhm.
teams in this city cannot do that. There's a higher degree
There's too much importance.
of criticism, of responsibility, and a fan reaction
Interest.
to these questions of success, of marketing, of getting closer to the soccer community. So is it now fair to start asking these questions? And you know the coverage, both of you do, for both of these teams. It needs more. It needs to be more mainstream. It's still superficial to me, and mainstream media just does not cover these teams. I know I threw a lot there, but Victor, how do we balance caring and loving the sport, which everyone on this panel does, but also trying to be honest about things that aren't working? If we're too critical, we're the bad guys. Is that fair, Victor? And I'll ask you that because at times you've been accused of that.
I have, and I continue probably, but I mean that's not going to stop me from doing my job, because again, I think when you're on this side, I mean, you're the midway point of you're the communicator, right, between the team and the fans. And I think either way you go, when you don't ask the right questions, you're doing a disservice to one side or the other. And again, you just said mainstream media is not going to do it. So what are you offering the fans? Are you doing your due diligence and I get it, there's always going to be the homer fans that they're going to have the orange colored glasses, but there's also a lot of empty seats in that stadium, and those are the people that that also want this team to change. And I think just because they've been so jaded that they don't even muster the desire, the strength to even bother expressing their frustration on Twitter or Facebook, or and they just I'll go on with my life. What I didn't spend on season tickets, I'll go travel the world, or I'll go spend it on this thing or that thing, or I just won't give it to them. But it's silence, and that silence is deafening again when you see each and every empty seat in that stadium. The other side to that is, if that stadium was full, they'd get a whole bunch of coverage from mainstream media. But like you said, you can't get away with it with the other teams. Something happens with the Astros relieving pitcher. Your fans, on social media are discussing it, are debating it. I mean, little things like that that you don't get in this sport. And it's not that the passion doesn't exist. I think you have fans that you've turned away from the product, you're not connecting with them. I think it's always right to be fair and be critical. And unfortunately, they've harbored an environment where you almost feel guilty for doing it, or you feel like you're attacking them for doing it, right? So now, what do you have left? Is these softball questions about, what do you see? How do you see this next team? Or how so-and-so doing? Or, how's your dog doing? I saw him on social media, and this is the environment that we have.
I think we can balance all of that, but same topic to you, Laura. Is an objective look at the teams important, and will it help our sport?
Look, I think that Houston is a difficult market in the sense that it's very multicultural, but I think that other places have been successful. I think Los Angeles is something that's kind of similar, that's also very multicultural, because I've had a lot of people that say, well, maybe people don't follow the Dynamo or the Dash because they're already following, a team from their home country. And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. But I've seen people here that are, from El Salvador, Honduras, or Colombia, or Mexico, and they watch their leagues at home, but they also have a league in La Liga Española. Like, bro, you've never been to Spain. You don't have any true connection to Spain, but because of the players, you have a connection to it. So you can have different teams that have that same passion. And then how are you not going to feel connection for a team that's here? And I think, again, that falls into like the marketing kind of thing to really make the people feel connected. I think that the Astros have done something, besides win, obviously that helps a lot, but they've done a lot of marketing that you were like, they're doing something to change because they started to win. I remember covering the Astros when they had, I want to say it was 100 games that they hadn't won. And, they were practically giving away the seats. Like, I remember buying $5 seats. $5 seats.
Wow.
You could bring your own food because people were like, oh, the food's too expensive. You could bring your own food. We'll give you food with the $5 tickets. Like, it was crazy. Like, I remember taking my family to like cheap nights, and we were like free food, free popcorn, hot dogs, beer. So I think that there's teams that have gone through it, but they've transformed. There's teams that are stagnant. Like, for me, the Rockets are stagnant. I think the Texans are stagnant. Let's see this season. But I think that right now the Dynamo and the Dash are below stagnant. I think that they're going through something, and I think they've been going through something for the last couple years. It's not seasons. It's interesting to see. It's sad to see, because I think that these questions that we have are not for the players, are not for the coaches, because they're not the ones in charge of making the big decisions. So sometimes when we do ask those questions, sometimes I'm like, it's a waste of time if I ask this player, what are you doing to make this team win? Like, there's no reason for me to ask that player that, because they're already overwhelmed knowing that there's things they can't control and getting beat on the field.
Overwhelmed with what?
Overwhelmed with the losses. I mean, you can't control. It's out of your control.
Then don't be a pro player. Don't be a pro player. Pick up a day job somewhere. Go chase a career.
Tools,
no, but this is the life of a professional player, isn't it?
It also has to do with the tools that you have. But
this is not the life of a professional athlete.
Let's say it's in a different market. Okay, let's talk about engineering. I know people that are the most amazing engineers and didn't thrive in one company because that company was toxic. Went to another one and thrived like there was no tomorrow.
Sure.
But why do they go into engineering? But why do they go into engineering?
I'm giving an example because you're saying don't be a pro soccer player. So I think yes, overwhelming.
No, but like you said, if the environment
loses all the time.
Well, exactly.
So what if you're a pro player? What are you gonna do,
Laura?
No, but you're saying like it's too much for them to lose.
It is, because you can't control it. You can't control what's going with the team. The only thing you could do is like play with what you have. And the players that you have aren't doing it.
But should the standard for a professional athlete, regardless of sport, regardless of gender, be the same? And the pressure that's exerted? I think that's a fair question. I think maybe, Victor, that's where you're headed. This is a high expectation, high stress.
They have no pressure. They have no pressure. The coach has been absent since June, and nobody's asking questions until yesterday because they're dead last. In any other pressure-filled environment in sports, there would have been questions daily.
That's my point.
Weekly, at least, and asking questions. And why are you losing? Do you feel great losing? When I go to trainings, and again I see these players, you're telling me, they can't handle. It's too much for them. Then why the hell are they laughing in training? No.
Don't twist my words, Victor. I said that it's overwhelming if you keep asking the same question, because it's going to be the same.
Nobody's asking anything is the point. Nobody's asking anything.
Yes, we have. We've asked them, like, so how do you feel with this new coach? The new coach, the interim coach. And they were like, well, we're trying to see how it fits in. It's like
why they're overwhelmed?
Over and over.
Because you're right. Because it's the same questions over and over. Because it's different media interviewing them. Because nobody gives a damn to interview them consistently. It's different faces every time. And it's the same questions instead of diving deeper into some more intricacies.
To me, those questions are not for the players. To me, those questions are for the higher ups.
Okay. Certain things are off limit. Sure. Here's the other thing. I'll just get into it. I don't think it's too much to ask them to do more to grow the game. I do think at certain points they can do more to bring fans out if they really wanted to. But again, maybe they can't be bothered. Maybe they they got a life at
Or
home.
they're not
and
allowed. That's where the mystery goes. They're not
Well,
allowed.
whatever
We
it
don't
is.
know. We don't know. Like when I see the players, even after a loss, and they're out there signing autographs and giving pictures and blah 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 blah. I'm pretty sure they don't feel 100%, but they're still out there doing it, like signing and saying at least thank you to the players that to the fans that were out there. So when I say overwhelmed, I don't
but
say
that
just
should
for
be
that
that
game.
should
I
be the
say
bare
for
minimum.
seasons.
I think where we find ourselves is in a time where the expectation, Victor, of a certain sport is not equal to other sports. I'm talking about soccer. The sad part, Victor, of what you just mentioned, and Laura, what we're talking about is a handful of people care from the outside looking in. What hurts me, because I love this sport, is that at the end of the day, the pressure to win, to improve, in particular with the dash, is not there because people aren't tuning in. And that is a harsh reality. Victor, you're right. Who's reporting on their losses or wins? Very few people. Who is demanding, even from a fan point of view, that they win? We are there more for the love and support of the sport, and I consider myself that, than because we want them to be equal to the Texans or the Rockets or the Astros. How do we change that? I think it's about lifting the standard. And I think it's about if these sports, if these teams, and I'll be very direct, if the Dash and the Dynamo want to be considered at the same level of the Astros, the Rockets, and the Texans, they have to deal, Victor, with the reality of you've got to win. If not, you've got to make changes. And if not, you've got to have people that are responsible. Among us three, it's a very emotional conversation because we care. Victor, my sad reality is
I
often
guarantee
people
you,
don't.
I guarantee you, inside those four walls, they're not having conversations like this.
I would hope they do. They're being paid for that, aren't they?
Yeah, but
You
they
would think.
don't not like in other leagues that if you don't fill the stadium, you don't get money. And I think that's also detrimental in a sort of sense. I think that
Yeah.
if there was some kind of pressure of not having those stadiums full, like
Yeah,
I
like
think
when the
that
Texans
they
were losing fans and that stadium was starting to be empty, that meant real money for them. That's why they made some changes. The Astros, maybe they were apathetic because they were trying to sell the team, but once the new ownership came in, that was somewhat right of the priority. And I think that's the other problem
So-
here. These are leagues that are carried by the national sponsors. They don't have a need to make money, and that's also dangerous.
Yeah, Victor, Laura, as we wrap up the segment, and I thank you both because it's been very honest, very direct, and fans of Soccer Tejas, this is more of what you'll be listening to when we put together the Soccer Tejas podcast. Let's leave on a positive note. I like that aspect because I don't think it's all doom and gloom, and I'll give you my take on this. I grew up in
Victor
Houston.
does. Doom and gloom. Doom and gloom.
I grew
But
up
because it's been years of this, we've been calling this for years.
I know. It's yeah. Yes.
He cares, Laura. That's
And
why.
I get it. Like, you're right. Good for them. They're signing autographs for the same 100 people. And they're not. They never focus on bringing more.
You're taking it in a different way. Like I think that there's a responsibility as professional players, but some of the hardcore questions that we want to ask, it's going to be talking to like a wall. Like they don't know.
well,
Like they're going to say,
needs-
well, we're trying our best. So
it needs to go to ownership and it needs to go to the front
Yes.
office. That's their job. They're responsible for that. But let's close on something positive. The dark ages, the dark ages of the sport in Houston. I've been in Houston since the 80s, playing, coaching, etc. In the 80s, 90s, before MLS, our sport had no respect. Our sport was not covered by mainstream media. Our sport was not even second or third. It was fourth or fifth division. The culture has changed and shifted. I see opportunity for the sport to continue to grow. And I see opportunity, friends, for the sport to really be among the top sports in our city. Maybe I'm dreaming. Maybe it won't happen in my lifetime, but I really want that to happen. In general terms, and I'll start with you, Laura, because we'll give Victor, after he takes his little pills, the last word. Laura, something positive about these franchises. I know at times, and Victor and I have talked about this, winning is not even necessary because the value of the franchise continues to grow, and that's the way they're looking at it. I think that's my bottom line at the end of the day. If Mr. Ted Siegel were losing money, I think it'd be more of an immediate reaction to winning immediately. What can we take away from the last year, the last 2 years with the Dynamo Dash organization in a positive way? Are we headed in a right direction? And actually, Mr. Ted Siegel's been here, already 3 years, Victor? Help me out here. Someone help me out.
I would say 3.
3 years. 3 years. It's time. The honeymoon's over, right? I think questions have to head in that direction. But Loud, I'll go to you first. Help us find the rainbow, if you can.
I need more time. I
I threw that one at you. Is there something you're seeing?
I think that the only honestly, like the positive that I see is that, and Victor's gonna say that I'm being nice, blah blah blah, and the players and this. But look,
well, this is the question. You're supposed to be nice.
I see these players. I see these players honestly knowing. I want to be honest. I honestly think that they know that they're going to lose. But I still see some kind of fight in a lot of them. Like they even get upset. I'm not saying fight on the pitch, but I see some of them like really get upset when they're like the ball isn't given to their side, or they don't get the corner kick, or they miss the goal and blah blah blah. And it might be that they, for whatever reason, they missed or whatever. But at least there's a spark of like, I think it gives you hope that the players, the ones that are here, or some of them that are here, do want to win. I think that's like the positive. I think that there's connection to the players, that whether because their parents took them, because the soccer league took them to watch the dash, there's somewhat of a connection. I think that it's strong. So I see a positive there that can be really grown from those young players that look up to these players, because a lot of the kids don't really know who's winning or who's losing at that age.
Sure.
And I think if you grow that love for the team at that age, no matter like what the outcome is, I think that's like the positive thing that I take.
I put you on the spot. You did well, and I know you were searching to give us something positive there to end the segment.
Maybe drowning there a little bit.
Victor,
no, and it's what I've said before, and one of the other ones that we had, like if you guys listen to what we've talked about, I think that's one of the positive things that I see, those kids wanting the autographs of the players, and the players, Victor said it, you have to do it anyway, it's the least that they can do. But more so than that, I feel yeah, it might be, but I feel like it's also a connection of making the soccer grow within the city, and the kids having a good experience with the player themselves. And that's what the positive I take, honestly, because there's not a lot of players that really do that.
Victor,
takes so much time.
Victor, maybe the hardest question for you tonight. Let's leave on a positive note. What have you seen headed in the right direction? Is it the fan engagement, interaction with the Dash or the Dynamo? Is it the Dynamo now looking like 2 seasons in a row going to the playoffs? Is it consistent crowds for the Dynamo? Is it a culture that's starting to turn around? Give me something positive as we close up the segment. Silence.
Well, I'd like to say, it's going in the right direction, but I don't see that. I mean, I know your eyes lie to you a little bit, because if the Dynamo go into a second playoff year, I mean, it's better than not, right? But MLS is also built that way. Look, I think it's good to at least have these teams present, right? To have that connection to the professional game. I'll go with what I've always said. I think it's such untapped potential with these 2 teams. They could be the great connector to all walks of the game in the city of Houston, which we know stretches to every part of the city. If they chose to do it, if they got after it, if they said, let's put a concerted effort here to make this be a representative of what soccer in Houston is and connect the community. We're 2 years away from, less than 2 years now, from the World Cup. It's almost like it's not even coming. I mean, they should be drumming this up. They should be looking at this opportunity that when these games are here, they could be realizing some of that untapped potential and really use it as a boost. So I'll say it in that. I think at least they're positioned because of the 2 pro leagues to be there. This isn't some 3rd division, 2nd division team where it's the same where you're like, oh, well, they could be signing autograph. I mean, no, I mean, they have the machine behind it of being in the pro leagues. If they truly wanted to make this, the great connector in the city of Houston, I think they could.
The potential is there. And Victor, I want to thank you for your time on this first edition of our The Soccer Tejas podcast. Honesty, coming from the heart, that's what we want here. And we'll also have more interaction with all of you friends that follow us. Laura, same thing to you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for being with us today. And friends, more than anything, thanks to all of you for taking the time to listening to watching what we now call the Soccer Tejas podcast. So on behalf of Laura, on behalf of Victor, I'm Alex Parra. Thank you. And until next time, when we meet here on the Soccer Tejas podcast. Well done, guys. We'll edit that.